The revelation struck me with the force of a physical blow: pregnancy. And it was Lysander's doing, deliberate and calculated. His true colors, carefully masked, for years, had finally bled through, demanding I forsake tradition, forgo a bride price, and even contribute to the marital home he so desperately desired. A bitter laugh caught in my throat. "Oh, Lysander, my dear brother," I'd feigned nonchalance, a regretful shrug of my shoulders. "It's probably just a delayed cycle." Words of dismissal, meant to soothe his grasping nature, but inside, a cold dread was taking root. Now, perched precariously on the edge of the porcelain throne, a chilling premonition solidified. My period was undeniably, agonizingly late. Trembling fingers fumbled with the sanitary pad, peeling it back to reveal a stark, empty surface. A wave of icy despair washed over me, leaving me breathless and hollow. "Darling," I began, my voice barely a whisper, laced with a tremor of fear, I think I might be pregnant." I stood before Lysander, my hand instinctively hovering over my still flat abdomen, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of apprehension. He recoiled as if burned, stepping back abruptly, his denial sharp and immediate. "Impossible, Eleanor. We were careful. We used protection." His eyes darted away, unable to meet my gaze, betraying the very conviction he tried to project. I sank onto the floor, the cold tiles mirroring the chilling desolation spreading through my heart. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Then we should schedule an appointment after the lockdown lifts, shouldn't we?" The words were leaden, each syllable a painful admission of what needed to be done. My suggestion, however, ignited an unexpected fervor in him. "Accidents happen, Eleanor. Even with precautions. It's meant to be. We should keep it. Give the old Lysander lineage an heir." His voice, moments ago strained with denial, now resonated with a sudden, unnerving conviction. He pulled me into an embrace, his arms tight around me, a gesture meant to reassure, but which felt hollow and chillingly possessive. The stark dichotomy of his reactions, the whiplash shift from vehement denial to possessive acceptance, seeded a profound unease within me. Suspicion, sharp and unwelcome, began to gnaw at the edges of my trust. That night, sleep offered little solace. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my mind a restless sea of anxieties. Through the fog of sleep, a muffled murmur seeped into my awareness. Lysander's voice, low and conspiratorial, drifted from the living room. "It's done," he murmured into the phone, his tone hushed, yet laced with a disturbing confidence. "She's trapped, don't worry." A chilling reassurance, directed at an unseen recipient on the other end of the line. Warmth bloomed in my chest, a fragile tendril of relief unfurling in the darkness. He was taking responsibility, planning to get a vasectomy. He was thinking of me. Overwhelmed by a sudden rush of tenderness, I nestled closer to him, seeking the comfort of his presence, and drifted back into a deeper, more trusting sleep. The next morning, while tidying the bedroom, my fingers brushed against something sharp and unfamiliar, tucked beside the bed. I pulled it out, a glint of metal catching the morning light. "Lysander, what is this? You always..." I started to scold him for leaving sharp objects around, about to launch into a familiar, gentle reprimand about his carelessness. But then, the fragments of last night's overheard conversation. The cryptic "it's done," the chilling "she's trapped," coalesced with the sight of the needle in my hand. A wave of nausea washed over me, cold and visceral. A horrifying realization began to dawn. He appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed with a carefully constructed concern. "What is it, Eleanor? What's wrong?" Panic flared. My mind raced, scrambling to conceal the damning evidence. With a swift, almost frantic movement, I shoved the needle beneath the bed sheet, concealing it from his view. Then, forcing a bright, albeit shaky, smile, I flung open the curtains, letting the sunlight flood the room. "You always forget to open the curtains, silly." I chided, my voice a strained imitation of playful affection. He crossed the room, pulling me into a hug, his body warm against mine, yet his touch now felt tainted, unsettling. "Soon you'll be Mrs. Lysander," he murmured into my hair, a possessive endearment that now sounded like a cage door closing. "You'll have even more to take care of then, won't you?" As soon as he retreated to his study, the carefully constructed facade dropped. My hands trembling, I yanked open the bedside drawer, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. There, nestled amongst his belongings, was the packaging of the syringe. And on the cardboard, stark and undeniable, a hole pierced through the label. A pre-filled syringe. Pre-filled with what? The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and clammy. My body began to tremble uncontrollably, a violent shivering that shook me to my core. 6 years. 6 years of shared dreams, whispered promises, and what I had believed to be genuine affection. 6 years of building a life together, only to discover it was all built on a foundation of deceit. I understood his eagerness for marriage, his desire for a family. But the method. The insidious, manipulative betrayal. He had spoken of respect, of waiting until I was ready, of shielding me from parental pressures. All lies. All a carefully orchestrated deception, to achieve his own selfish ends. But the needle, the calculated deception of the pregnancy, was merely the opening act in his elaborate scheme. I was soon to discover the true depths of his avarice. Lysander spoke constantly of wedding preparations, of eagerly anticipating our future together. Yet, his words were hollow, devoid of action. No wedding plans were initiated, no dates discussed, no concrete steps taken. A growing unease gnawed at me. I feared the inevitable. The visible confirmation of a pregnancy he so desperately desired, the social awkwardness, the loss of control. Driven by a desperate need for clarity, I suggested we call my parents, a casual mention of informing them, of perhaps discussing the traditional bride price. He deflected, evaded, his responses vague and noncommittal, skillfully steering the conversation away from any concrete commitments. Then, as if on cue, his mother, Agatha, called. Her voice, usually reserved, was effervescent, almost giddy. "Eleanor, dear. We're planning to buy a marital home for you and Lysander, right here in our hometown." A wave of relief washed over me, momentarily calming the turbulent waters of my anxieties. Despite the deceitful conception, despite the manipulative tactics, they were, it seemed, willing to acknowledge and accept the situation. They were taking responsibility. Perhaps this was a sign of genuine acceptance, a willingness to welcome me into their family. But then, Agatha's next words pricked the fragile bubble of my hope, a subtle shift in tone, a discordant note that resonated with a chilling familiarity. "The house. Well, we're a little short on the full payment. Just 50,000 short. Perhaps you could contribute, Eleanor? We'll provide the house, and your family can handle the renovations. Perfectly fair, don't you think? And whose name will be on the deed?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral, masking the growing suspicion that coiled in my stomach. I was no fool. The houses in their small town rarely exceeded 60,000 in total value. And Lysander still owed me a significant sum of money, a debt he conveniently seemed to have forgotten. As anticipated, Agatha's response was a flurry of dismissive laughter, a clumsy attempt to deflect my perfectly reasonable question. "Oh, Eleanor, darling, we're all family now. What does it matter whose name is on a piece of paper? You're carrying my grandchild. Don't be so petty. Everything yours will be ours, you know, once my grandson is born. It's all for the Lysander family." Her words tumbled out. A torrent of possessiveness and entitlement, revealing the chilling truth beneath the carefully constructed facade of familial warmth. In her careless pronouncements, she inadvertently exposed the calculated deception, the insidious plan that had been unfolding for years. Lysander, overhearing his mother's blatant avarice, snatched the phone from her hand, abruptly ending the call. Agatha's words, her blatant disregard for fairness, for my financial contribution, for my very personhood, shattered the last vestiges of illusion. 6 years. 6 years of what? I had foolishly believed to be a precious, shared love, now revealed as nothing more than a meticulously crafted scheme, a calculated exploitation masquerading as romance. University graduation. He had discouraged me from pursuing postgraduate studies, cloaking his selfish motives in faux concern for my well-being, claiming he didn't want me to work so hard. If not for my mother's unwavering insistence and her decisive enrollment in a prep course, his plan would have succeeded. Then, upon securing employment, he had meticulously squirreled away his entire salary, presenting it as prudent saving for our future, for our wedding, for me. Meanwhile, he had subtly, skillfully, manipulated me into covering our daily expenses, convincing me it was a shared responsibility, a partnership. And then, the ultimate betrayal, the brazen act of financial exploitation. Under the guise of business ventures and temporary cash flow issues, he had extracted $10,000 from my savings account, a sum that had vanished into the black hole of his unaccountable finances, never to be repaid. And I, blinded by love, by trust, by a naive belief in his promises, had willingly, foolishly, poured my hard-earned money into his bottomless pit of avarice. I had nourished a viper, believing it to be a fledgling dove. I had invested in a mirage, mistaking it for a genuine oasis of love and commitment. I was a fool. A complete and utter fool. This child conceived through deceit and manipulation, could not, would not, be born. And Lysander, the architect of this elaborate deception, would not only be banished from my life, but he would also be forced to disgorge every penny he had so cunningly, so callously, extracted from me. He would pay. He would pay dearly. The relentless grip of the lockdown had long since depleted our pantry. We were entirely reliant on the kindness of strangers, on the daily deliveries of sustenance provided by tireless volunteers. Each day, like clockwork, they arrived at our doorstep, silent angels of mercy in a world shrouded in fear and uncertainty. One afternoon, a young volunteer, a girl barely out of her teens, lingered at the doorway after delivering our rationed meal. Hesitation flickered in her eyes, a blush creeping up her cheeks. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, requesting a favor. She needed sanitary pads. Without a second thought, I swept my arm towards the overflowing stockpile of feminine hygiene products I had diligently accumulated, anticipating months of confinement. Take them all, dear, I offered generously, disinfecting the packages with a quick wipe before handing them over. I won't be needing them anytime soon, I added with a wry smile, a subtle, knowing glance towards my still flat stomach. Not anymore, anyway. Then, emboldened by a sudden impulse, I asked if she would be willing to exchange contact information. Perhaps you could help me with a small errand? I inquired, my voice casual. My intentions carefully concealed beneath a veneer of nonchalance. Certainty, I knew, was paramount. I needed to confirm my suspicions, to arm myself with irrefutable proof. The young volunteer, whose name I soon learned was Clara, proved to be remarkably efficient. And thankfully, sanitary pads were not considered essential goods, circumventing the bureaucratic red tape that often hampered lockdown deliveries. The very next day, a small, discreet package was delivered to my door. I retreated to the sterile sanctuary of the bathroom, my heart pounding with a mixture of trepidation and a strange, almost perverse, anticipation. I unwrapped the package, my fingers clumsy with nervous energy. There it was, the small plastic stick that held the key to my future, to my freedom. I followed the instructions, my hands trembling as I waited for the agonizingly slow minutes to tick by. Then, the results. One line. One solitary, undeniable line. Negative. Not pregnant. Relief, sharp and exhilarating, flooded through me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. I stared at the single line, then back at my reflection in the mirror, a hysterical laugh bubbling up from deep within my chest. One line, I choked out, tears of hysterical relief streaming down my face. One line. I'm not pregnant. Sister's not pregnant. Habit, ingrained over years of shared intimacy, propelled me towards the living room, towards Lysander, to share the good news. But halfway there, the ingrained reflex faltered, reality crashing down like a cold wave. Lysander was no longer a confidant, a partner, a source of comfort. He was the enemy. The architect of my current predicament. The target of my burgeoning plan for retribution. I swallowed the words, biting back the impulse, the years of conditioned sharing. I retreated to the bedroom, carefully concealing the damning evidence of the negative pregnancy test, tucking it away in a hidden corner of my drawer. Then, a new plan began to form, insidious and exhilarating in its audacity. I logged onto an online shopping platform, my fingers flying across the keyboard, searching for realistic pregnancy. Belly. A mischievous grin spread across my face. Fake pregnancy belly. Perfect. Various sizes, various months. A veritable wardrobe of simulated gestation. Click. Add to cart. Purchase confirmed. I wanted to see his reaction. To witness his performance. To expose the depths of his depravity. I wanted to watch him squirm in the tangled web of his own deceit. I wanted to see his true face. And I would. I would see it all. Online shopping proved remarkably efficient. The fake pregnancy bellies arrived at the local collection point with surprising speed. But the city remained under lockdown, our movements restricted, confined to the suffocating walls of our apartment. Delivery thwarted, but not urgency diminished. Patience became a weapon, a necessary component of my meticulously crafted plan. The daily reports of confirmed cases began to plateau, the ominous pronouncements from the building's loudspeaker subsided. The suffocating grip of the lockdown was finally loosening. Freedom, albeit tentative, was on the horizon. Agatha's phone calls, however, became increasingly frequent, increasingly demanding. Her saccharine tone had curdled into a sharp, insistent whine. Eleanor, dear, the family finances are a bit tight right now. Perhaps you could help out? After all, we're family now. She droned on, her voice dripping with false intimacy, her words laced with thinly veiled avarice. I parried her demands with practiced ease, my responses carefully crafted to deflect her grasping inquiries. Auntie, I simpered, adopting the familial term to amplify the irony, you know how it is. Lysander and we've pulled all our resources. Everything I have is tied up with him. My carefully constructed evasion, however, backfired spectacularly. Agatha, oblivious to subtlety, seized upon my words, twisting them to her advantage. Oh, I've heard about your parents, Eleanor. They receive a generous pension, don't they? Surely, they could spare a little something in these urgent circumstances? It wouldn't look good, you know, if you were to show too much before the wedding. People might talk. She punctuated her veiled threat with a knowing chuckle, a crass insinuation that sent a shiver of disgust down my spine. Family. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. Blind me, why don't you, and call me family? I patted my still flat stomach, a silent promise echoing in my mind, and abruptly ended the call. Moments later, Lysander's name flashed across my phone screen. His voice, when he spoke, was devoid of warmth, stripped bare of any pretense of affection. Eleanor, he barked, his tone sharp and accusatory, I'm warning you. Be respectful to my mother. The venom in his voice, the utter lack of empathy, struck me with the force of a physical blow. It was the voice of a stranger, cold, hostile, utterly devoid of the tender cadence I had once cherished. It was the voice of an enemy. It was the same tone, the same calculated charm he had used years ago, over the phone, when he had first asked me to be his girlfriend. The memory, once sweet, now tasted like bile. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating, across the digital divide. Without a word, I disconnected the call, severing the fragile thread of communication that still tenuously connected us. Why? I asked myself, a silent scream echoing in the emptiness of my heart. How had we arrived at this desolate wasteland of betrayal and animosity? Where had the years of shared dreams, of whispered promises, of what I had believed to be love, vanished? He returned home late that evening, his face a mask of cold fury. He slammed the door with such force that the apartment shuddered. "Eleanor." He spat, his voice dripping with contempt, "You're carrying the Lysander family air. You better start acting like it and behave yourself." I stared at him, dumbfounded, struggling to decipher the layers of meaning in his pronouncements. Before I could formulate a response, he lunged forward, grabbing a glass from the coffee table, and hurled it at my feet. Glass shattered, shards flying across the floor, narrowly missing my bare toes. The sharp, crystalline sound echoed in the tense silence, punctuated by the ragged gasp that escaped my lips. This was Lysander? My Lysander? The man who had showered me with tenderness, with gentle words, with unwavering devotion? The man who had sworn to protect me, to cherish me, to love me unconditionally? This cold, violent stranger, who stood before me, his eyes blazing with a malevolent anger, was unrecognizable. Unfathomable. Rage, cold and pure, surged through me, eclipsing the fear. I snatched my own teacup, a delicate porcelain piece I had treasured for years, and hurled it with equal force at his feet. It exploded on impact, porcelain shards mingling with the fragments of glass, a silent declaration of war. "Think carefully, Eleanor," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt, "remember who is supporting you now." His words, laced with arrogance and entitlement, landed like a physical blow, each syllable a venomous barb piercing my heart. Supporting me? Since my pregnancy announcement, he had insisted, cajoled, then demanded that I relinquish my job, to focus on my health, on the baby. And I, foolishly believing in his sincerity, had acquiesced, willingly relinquishing my financial independence, my professional identity, my very autonomy. "I'll take care of you, darling," he had purred, the words now echoing in my memory like a cruel mockery. And now, those very words, "I'll take care of you," had morphed into a weapon, a tool of control, a constant reminder of my perceived dependence. The 2 years of my financial contributions, the years of shared expenses, the years of unwavering support I had provided him, had been erased, vanished into thin air, as if they had never existed. He had conveniently rewritten our shared history, casting himself as the sole provider, the magnanimous benefactor, the long-suffering victim of my supposed ingratitude. In that moment, something within me snapped. Hope, trust, affection, all withered and died, leaving behind a desolate wasteland of bitterness and resolve. My heart, once overflowing with love, now felt like a cold, empty void. The death of 1,000 dreams. The death of a love that never truly existed. Lysander's homecoming rituals devolved into a predictable pattern, late arrivals, reeking of stale alcohol, retreating directly to his study, a self-imposed exile behind closed doors. He was a ghost in our shared apartment, a phantom presence that haunted the edges of my awareness. Overnight, the man I had known, or thought I knew, had vanished, replaced by this cold, callous stranger. Love, I realized with a chilling certainty, could indeed disappear, evaporate into nothingness, leaving behind only the bitter residue of betrayal and resentment. But the fragile silence of the late hours was often shattered by muffled voices emanating from his study, hushed, conspiratorial murmurs that seeped through the thin walls, mocking my naive belief in his transformation. "She's pregnant, isn't she? What can she do? She's unemployed now. Where else can she go? She's trapped." His voice, laced with smug satisfaction, reached me through the closed door, each word a fresh wound. "Don't worry, Mom," he continued, his tone shifting to a sycophantic whine. "I know how much you sacrificed to raise me. I won't let you spend a single penny on this wedding." A chillingly ironic promise, given his mother's blatant attempts to extract funds from my family. I stood outside his study door, a silent eavesdropper, absorbing the venomous pronouncements, the callous calculations. No tears welled up, no sob escaped my lips. Only a cold, hard knot of hatred tightened in my stomach, a simmering rage that fueled my resolve. The following morning, Agatha arrived, bearing a carefully curated selection of gifts, cheap liquor, discount cigarettes, tokens of appeasement, intended to pave the way for her impending family visit. A prelude to the inevitable financial demands. I had anticipated her arrival, had foreseen her manipulative tactics. "They're not available today," I stated firmly, blocking her path, inventing a convenient excuse to preempt her unwelcome intrusion. "My parents are unavailable. Perhaps another time." But I had underestimated Agatha's tenacity, her utter lack of scruples. "Nonsense, dear. It's all arranged. Lysander has already booked the train tickets. We're going today." I turned to Lysander, a silent question etched on my face. He stood behind his mother, his gaze averted, his posture radiating guilt and discomfort. He avoided my eyes, a cowardly evasion that confirmed my worst fears. To allow them to descend upon my parents' home, to unleash their avarice and their manipulative tactics upon my unsuspecting family, was unthinkable. With a sigh of resignation, I grabbed my suitcase. Already packed with the tools of my deception, the fake pregnancy bellies, the carefully crafted narrative of impending motherhood. "Fine," I conceded, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Let's go." Upon arrival at my parents' home, my parents, ever gracious and welcoming, rushed out to greet us, their faces beaming with genuine warmth. Lysander trailed behind his mother, his demeanor sullen, his eyes downcast, radiating an air of sullen resentment. Agatha, with a perfunctory glance in my parents' direction, offered no greeting, no semblance of polite acknowledgement. She strode past them as if they were mere obstacles in her path, and immediately installed herself in my mother's cherished massage chair, a prized possession gifted by my father on their anniversary. Sinking into the plush leather, she launched into a torrent of saccharine pronouncements. "In-laws, my dear in-laws." Her voice dripped with false familiarity, her words a blatant disregard for my mother's very presence, for the established social niceties of a first meeting. "In-laws, my dear in-laws, your home is charming. Quite to my taste." She gushed, her body language radiating an unsettling intimacy as she leaned heavily against my father, her gaze sweeping dismissively over my mother, assessing, evaluating, judging. My father, visibly unnerved by Agatha's aggressive familiarity, recoiled, seeking refuge beside my mother, his face pale with discomfort. This blatant display of manipulative charm, this calculated performance of faux friendliness, at her age? The audacity of this aging drama queen was astounding. "Auntie," I interjected, my voice carefully polite, yet laced with a steely undertone, "that's my mother's chair. She needs it for her back." I politely requested her to vacate the seat, but Agatha, feigning offense, retaliated with a theatrical display of indignation. "My back is killing me after that long train ride. Just let me rest for a moment. Your mother said it was fine. Are you trying to bully an old lady now, Eleanor?" She punctuated her performance with a series of dramatic groans, clutching at her lower back, a picture of frail, suffering victimhood. Yet, I distinctly recalled witnessing her bounding up the train stairs with the agility of a mountain goat just hours earlier. Speechless, I moved to physically assist her out of the chair, but my mother, with a subtle shake of her head, restrained me. My mother, ever gracious, ever accommodating, abhorred confrontation, particularly in the delicate context of a first meeting between families. A public display of discord, a family squabble in front of the in-laws, was to be avoided at all costs. Reluctantly, I conceded, biting back my rising anger. As lunchtime approached, my parents busied themselves in the kitchen, preparing a feast of Hunanese delicacies, their culinary expertise a testament to their warm hospitality. Lysander, hovering near the kitchen doorway, offered a casual, dismissive pronouncement. "My mother doesn't eat spicy food." A dismissive aside, delivered with an air of entitlement, a complete disregard for the effort my parents were expending to accommodate their guest. Hunan cuisine, renowned for its fiery flavors, was meticulously adapted, the dishes toned down, the chili peppers omitted, all to appease the delicate palate of our ungracious guest. Then, Agatha, with the subtlety of a wrecking ball, launched into the real purpose of their visit. "So, about the bride price. What are the customs here?" She broached the topic with a jarring abruptness, her voice devoid of any pretense of politeness. A palpable tension descended upon the dining table, forks clattering against plates, conversation grinding to a halt. My parents exchanged a worried glance, a silent communication passing between them. My father, ever the diplomat, finally spoke. "In our region, the traditional bride price is around $12,000. But we understand young couples are just starting out. We were thinking perhaps 8,800? A lucky number, you know, for good fortune." Lysander had consistently played the poverty card, painting a bleak picture of his financial struggles. My parents, compassionate and understanding, had readily accepted his narrative, willing to compromise, to ease the financial burden on the young couple. They had lowered the bride price significantly, a generous gesture of goodwill. But Agatha, upon hearing the reduced sum, reacted as if personally insulted. Her face contorted, her voice rising in outrage. 8,800? For your daughter? Pregnant and all? She's practically damaged goods now. 4,000, maybe. And your family should contribute to the wedding home renovations, on top of that." Her words, crude and demeaning, hung in the air, thick with contempt. The casual cruelty of her pronouncements silenced the room. My parents, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and hurt, froze, their chopsticks suspended midair. My parents exchanged another silent, loaded glance, their expressions a complex tapestry of disappointment, hurt, and a growing sense of unease. My father, his voice firm, yet tinged with sadness, finally responded. "No. 8,800 is the absolute minimum. That is our final offer." His tone was resolute, unwavering, a quiet declaration of principle. I knew, with a pang of guilt, that even this reduced sum represented a significant financial stretch for my parents, a sacrifice born of their love for me, their desire to ensure my happiness, even in the face of such blatant disrespect. I turned to Lysander, my gaze fixed, unwavering, desperate to gauge his reaction, to discern even a flicker of dissent, a hint of shame, a spark of empathy in his impassive features. He, the supposed groom-to-be, the central figure in this unfolding drama, had remained conspicuously silent throughout his mother's appalling tirade. "Lysander," I addressed him directly, my voice cutting through the tense silence, "what are your thoughts on this?" Across the table, our eyes met, a silent battle of wills waged in the charged atmosphere. I needed to know. I needed to hear it from his own lips. Was he complicit in this blatant avarice? Or was there still a flicker of decency buried beneath the layers of deceit? His response, when it came, was a masterclass in manipulative deflection, a calculated attempt to shift the blame, to portray my family as the unreasonable party. "Eleanor, darling," he began, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "I always thought your family was different. Not so materialistic." His words, a thinly veiled accusation, a blatant attempt at moral blackmail, hung in the air, heavy with hypocrisy. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "And I retorted, my voice laced with sarcasm, always thought your family was different. Not so. Calculating. I deliberately emphasized the word calculating, letting it hang in the air, a stark indictment of their meticulously orchestrated scheme. They had believed themselves to be masters of deception, pulling the strings, manipulating the narrative, confident in their ability to exploit my naivete, my love. But they were wrong. So utterly, tragically wrong. They were not masterminds. They were clowns. Pathetic, transparent clowns, stumbling through a poorly scripted farce. Since we seem to have reached an impasse, I announced, rising from my chair, deliberately exaggerating my pregnant waddle, perhaps Auntie and Lysander should revisit us another day. When we've all had time to reflect. I ushered them towards the door, a forced smile plastered on my face, my hand resting protectively on my fake pregnancy belly. As I turned to bid them farewell, I caught a glimpse of Agatha's face. A triumphant smirk stretched across her lips, a grotesque distortion of maternal pride. Yes, we'll return soon for another visit. We wouldn't want to delay things too long, now, would we? Especially with the baby on the way. Wouldn't want things to become too obvious. She punctuated her veiled threat with another chilling chuckle, her eyes lingering on my fake belly, a grotesque parody of grandmotherly anticipation. Turning back to my parents, I forced another smile, a brittle, fragile imitation of cheerfulness. They mirrored my expression, their smiles equally strained. Equally unconvincing. The forced joviality hung in the air, a thin veneer masking the raw wounds inflicted by Agatha's callousness, by Lysander's betrayal. As the door clicked shut behind our unwelcome guests, my father's forced composure crumbled. His face hardened, his jaw clenched, a visible manifestation of his barely suppressed rage. That's it, he declared, slamming his fist on the table, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. This is nothing but a calculated scheme to bleed us dry. They think they can take advantage of us? They think we're a family of pushovers? Do they think we don't have any backbone, any self-respect? Do they think we don't have any men in this family? My mother, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, reached out, her hand trembling as she touched my arm. Her mother is difficult. To put it mildly. I'm worried about you, darling. If you marry into that family, you'll be miserable. Constantly battling her, constantly being belittled, constantly living under their thumb. Perhaps we should reconsider. The baby. Her voice trailed off, the unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. Perhaps you should consider an abortion? Absolutely, I responded immediately, my voice firm, unwavering, brooking no argument. Absolutely not. I flashed them a reassuring smile, a wink of conspiratorial confidence. Then, with a dramatic flourish, I reached under my dress and unceremoniously detached the fake pregnancy belly, holding it aloft like a trophy. There is no baby, I declared, my voice ringing with triumph. What is this? My father stammered, his eyes wide with disbelief, his confusion mirroring my mother's. I led them to the sofa, gently guiding them to sit, then settled between them, taking their hands in mine. And then, I began to unravel the intricate tapestry of deceit, to expose the web of lies and manipulation that Lysander and his mother had so meticulously woven. I recounted the overheard phone calls, the pre-filled syringe, the negative pregnancy test, Agatha's avaricious pronouncements, Lysander's callous betrayal. I laid bare the entire sordid saga, omitting no detail, sparing no one, least of all myself, in my self-deprecating recounting of my own naivete, my own foolish trust. As I concluded my narrative, the silence in the room was thick with unspoken emotions. My father's face, initially contorted with anger, softened, replaced by a look of profound sadness, tinged with a grudging admiration for my cunning. My mother, her eyes still glistening, squeezed my hand tightly, her silent gesture conveying a mixture of relief, pride, and a lingering worry for my future. Finally, my father spoke, his voice low, but firm. This is outrageous. They tried to cheat us. To exploit us. They thought they could get away with this? They thought they could take advantage of our kindness? This is unforgivable. We should call the police. We should sue them. We should. His voice trailed off, his anger momentarily eclipsing his practical sensibilities. I gently squeezed his hand, calming his righteous indignation. No, Dad, I reassured him, no police. No lawsuits. Not yet, anyway. I have a plan. I paused, letting my words sink in, then continued, my voice hardening with resolve. I'm going back. I'm going to get my money back. Every single penny they swindled from me. And then I'm going to make them pay. In ways they never imagined. I assured them, with a confidence I didn't entirely feel, that I would remain detached, emotionally uninvolved, that this was purely a business transaction, a matter of recovering my financial losses. I carefully omitted the more vengeful aspects of my plan, the deeper, more personal motivations that fueled my resolve. I knew they would worry, would object, would try to dissuade me from embarking on such a potentially risky, emotionally draining endeavor. And to some extent, I was lying. Retrieving the money was merely the first step. Justice, retribution, revenge. These were the true drivers of my actions. These were the fires that burned within me, consuming my grief, transforming my despair into a cold, calculating determination. They listened, their faces etched with a mixture of apprehension and reluctant acceptance. After much persuasion, after repeated assurances that I would prioritize my safety, my well-being, that this was not about revenge, but about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, they finally, grudgingly, agreed to my plan. But I had lied. Partial truths, strategic omissions. Necessary deceptions to assuage their parental anxieties, to secure their reluctant blessing. Reclaiming the money was indeed a priority, a crucial component of my plan. But it was not the ultimate goal. Justice, yes. But also something more. Something darker. Something that whispered of retribution, of payback, of making them suffer as I had suffered. Keeping my true intentions concealed from my parents was a calculated necessity. The aging matriarch, Agatha, was unlikely to physically challenge me, to tear off my clothes in a public spectacle to expose my deception. Lysander, increasingly distant, increasingly indifferent, had already retreated into a separate bedroom, a self-imposed exile from our shared life. The only remaining hurdle, the only potential point of vulnerability, was the impending prenatal checkup. The scheduled appointment loomed, a ticking time bomb that threatened to detonate my carefully constructed facade. I needed to navigate this obstacle with meticulous precision, to ensure my deception remained undetected. Back in our cramped apartment, Lysander and Agatha greeted me with an air of smug triumph, their body language radiating an almost palpable sense of entitlement. They didn't even bother to invite me inside, assuming, perhaps, that I would simply slink away, defeated, cowed by their superior tactics. Ignoring their dismissive demeanor, I simply brushed past them, striding into the apartment as if I owned the place. Which, in a way, I did. I was the one who paid the rent. What right did they have to bar me from my own home? Baby, I cooed, adopting a sickly sweet tone, plastering a fake smile on my face, feigning a return to submissive compliance. I clung to Lysander's arm, feigning dependence, feigning affection, forcing myself to endure the physical revulsion that surged through me at his touch. Everything is going to be all right. Don't be angry anymore. I played the role of the contrite, apologetic fiancé, swallowing my disgust, forcing down the bile of resentment that threatened to choke me. Lysander's face softened, his expression shifting from sullen hostility to a grudging acceptance. The performance was working. My carefully crafted act of contrition was having the desired effect. He was a sucker for flattery, for feminine vulnerability, for the illusion of control. Fool, I thought, a surge of contempt washing over me. You arrogant, pathetic fool. Agatha, however, remained suspicious, her eyes narrowed, her gaze sharp and assessing. She shot me a venomous glare, a silent warning, a clear indication of her continued distrust. I deliberately ignored her, focusing all my attention on Lysander, clinging to him, whispering endearments, amplifying the performance, the charade of reconciliation. Let her seethe, I thought, a flicker of malicious satisfaction igniting within me. Let her stew in her own paranoia. Then, feigning a sudden pang of discomfort, I clutched at my lower back, groaning theatrically. Oh, my back. It's killing me. I winced, exaggerating my discomfort, drawing their attention to my fake pregnancy belly, the very symbol of their manipulative scheme. And then, I noticed it. On the coffee table, partially concealed beneath a stack of magazines, a document lay open, pages of legalese spilling across the polished surface. A contract. A legal agreement of some kind. I caught a fleeting glimpse of bold headings, of dense paragraphs, of signatures and seals. A business document, undoubtedly. But something about it felt off. Something about the way it was casually displayed, yet partially concealed, triggered in my mind. I managed to steal a few more glances at the document as I was helped to the sofa by a suddenly solicitous Lysander, feigning exhaustion, allowing myself to be fussed over, all the while surreptitiously gathering information, piecing together fragments of overheard conversations, fleeting glimpses of documents, subtle shifts in their behavior. The pieces of the puzzle began to coalesce, forming a disturbing, yet tantalizingly incomplete, picture. A collaboration agreement. Lysander's name prominently featured. A clause about personal conduct and reputational risk. And then, a chillingly familiar name, a name that resonated with a sudden, sickening familiarity. Xiaoya. Clara. The young volunteer. Her name inexplicably linked to Lysander, to this mysterious business deal. Later that day, feigning a need for fresh air, a craving for a specific brand of imported tea, I concocted an excuse to leave the apartment. My destination, a quaint little cafe nestled in a quiet corner of the city, a prearranged meeting place with Clara. Something good to share? I asked, teasingly, as Clara approached, her cheeks flushed, her eyes sparkling with an unmistakable joy. She giggled, a shy, nervous sound, and thrust her phone into my hands, her face radiating a mixture of excitement and bashful pride. Read this, she urged, her voice barely above a whisper. He finally asked me. Officially. I scrolled through the chat log, the saccharine exchanges, the declarations of love, the promises of a shared future, each message more cloying, more nauseating than the last. Then, my gaze landed on the profile picture of Clara's new boyfriend. A familiar face. A sickeningly familiar face. My heart lurched, a cold fist clenching around my chest. Disbelief, horror, and a dawning, horrifying realization washed over me in a tidal wave of nausea. It couldn't be. Could it? That person, he looks familiar, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper, my breath catching in my throat. The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and clammy. Clara, oblivious to my inner turmoil, her face still flushed with happiness, leaned closer, her eyes wide with curiosity. Do you know him, Eleanor? From somewhere? Her innocent question pierced me like a shard of ice. My mind raced, scrambling for a plausible explanation, a way to deflect her innocent inquiry, to conceal the devastating truth that threatened to shatter her fragile happiness. How long have you two been together? I asked, my voice strained, my gaze fixed on the screen, on the smiling face of my betrayer. Oh, for over a year now, Clara chirped, her voice brimming with youthful enthusiasm. He pursued me so persistently. Right after I started my internship at the company. He's a senior manager there, you know. Very important. Very busy. A year. The timeline clicked into place with chilling precision. A year ago. Exactly when Lysander had started his fabricated business trips. His late nights at the office, his increasingly frequent absences from our shared life. A year ago. When he had begun his elaborate charade of overwork and dedication, claiming he was building a future for us. A future that, it now became horrifyingly clear, did not include me. A future meticulously constructed on a foundation of deceit, betrayal, and calculated manipulation. A future built with her. "Show me more," I requested, my voice barely audible, my hand trembling as I reached for her phone. Clara, oblivious to the storm raging within me, eagerly swiped through her photo album, displaying a series of snapshots, each one a fresh stab wound to my already bleeding heart. Vacation photos, restaurant selfies, cozy evenings at home, stolen moments of intimacy, all meticulously documented, all radiating a sickeningly saccharine image of perfect happiness. As I scrolled through the images, Clara's voice faded into a distant hum, her words blurring into an incomprehensible drone. My world narrowed. Focusing solely on the screen, on the damning evidence of their illicit affair, on the smiling faces of my betrayer and my unsuspecting friend. Then, one image in particular caught my eye, freezing my blood in my veins. A professional headshot, a publicity photo, undoubtedly. Taken for his company website, or perhaps for a magazine interview. Lysander, impeccably groomed, radiating confidence and success, his smile. That same practiced, charming smile that had once captivated me, now twisted into a grotesque caricature of sincerity. And beneath the photo, a caption, in bold, unmistakable letters, Lysander Lin, rising star in the tech industry. Partner at Stellar Tech Solutions. Partner. Not just a senior manager. A partner. A significant stakeholder in a successful tech company. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The business trips. The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the carefully guarded secrecy surrounding his work. It wasn't a job. It was his company. His business. And Clara. Clara, my innocent, trusting friend, was unwittingly entangled in his web of deceit, another pawn in his elaborate game of manipulation and exploitation. Eleanor? Clara's voice broke through my stunned silence, her brow furrowed with concern. Eleanor, are you all right? You've gone completely pale. Clara, I began, my voice hoarse, my throat constricted with emotion. I need to show you something. I reached for my own phone, my fingers trembling as I navigated to my photo album, searching for the image I needed, the image that would shatter Clara's illusions, the image that would expose Lysander's true face, his true nature, his true depravity. I found it. A screenshot of the legal document I had glimpsed on their coffee table, the collaboration agreement, the one with Clara's name prominently featured, alongside Lysander's, and the name of his company. Stellar Tech Solutions. I held out my phone, my hand shaking, the image trembling on the screen. Clara, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, look at this. Clara leaned closer, her eyes scanning the image, her brow furrowing in confusion. Then, recognition dawned, slow, dawning horror creeping into her eyes. Her face paled, mirroring my own, her cheerful demeanor dissolving, replaced by a look of dazed disbelief. Eleanor. What is this? Clara, I said softly, my voice laced with a mixture of sorrow and grim resolve, I'm so sorry. But I think you need to know the truth about Lysander. About us. About him. I reached out, taking her hand, my touch offering a silent promise of support, of solidarity, of shared understanding. Clara, I said, my voice firming with resolve, let me tell you everything. Clara stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a dawning comprehension. She nodded slowly, her grip tightening on my hand, her youthful innocence about to be shattered by the harsh reality of betrayal and deceit. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible, yes, please. Tell me everything. And so, I began to speak, the words pouring out of me in a torrent of pent-up emotion, recounting the entire sordid saga, from the initial deception of the pregnancy, to Agatha's avarice, to Lysander's callous betrayal, to the chilling realization of his calculated manipulation. I laid bare the truth, the ugly, devastating truth, sparing nothing, concealing nothing, exposing the darkness that had lurked beneath the surface of what I had so foolishly believed to be love. And as I spoke, Clara listened, her face a mask of horror and disbelief, her youthful optimism slowly crumbling, replaced by the bitter taste of betrayal. We sat there, in the quiet corner of the café, two women bound together by a shared pain. United in our determination to seek justice, to expose the truth, to make him pay for his lies, for his deceit, for the devastation he had wrought in both our lives. The seeds of revenge had been sown. And they would soon begin to sprout. Lysander's profession, inextricably intertwined with the realm of emotions, rendered him, to a degree, a public figure. His entanglement with Clara, therefore, was not merely a lapse in judgment, but a catastrophic blunder, a self-inflicted wound for which he alone bore responsibility. Events unfolded with a gratifying precision. My fabricated pregnancy progressed with convincing realism. My abdomen, padded and contoured, swelled convincingly with each passing week. My social media presence, meticulously curated, presented a picture of domestic bliss, of a radiant expectant mother eagerly awaiting the arrival of her child. My Weibo account, intentionally obscure, boasting only a handful of Lysander's most devoted followers, served as the perfect clandestine platform. Its obscurity was its strength. The impending detonation of carefully planted information would be all the more explosive for its unexpected eruption from the shadows. Lysander and Agatha, entrenched in their calculated inertia, remained disconcertingly silent. They persisted in their strategy of protracted delay, seemingly content to drag the charade to its inevitable, and in their minds, advantageous conclusion. But their complacency was their undoing. I, in contrast, possessed the virtue of patience. The pretense of pregnancy afforded me a comfortable respite, a sanctioned period of domestic indulgence. I was, in essence, a pampered guest in their home, enjoying the dubious privileges of their begrudging hospitality, all expenses paid. The only true hardship was the theatrical enactment of morning sickness, a performance so convincing that it resulted in a genuine, albeit unintended, 10-pound weight loss. Method acting at its most unwelcome. Clara, bless her heart, played her part with commendable dedication. Her digital flirtation with Lysander continued unabated, a virtual flame fanned into a roaring inferno of online infatuation. Each evening, with unwavering punctuality, she orchestrated a clandestine rendezvous beneath my very window, a nightly performance of whispered farewells and lingering embraces. My role was that of a silent observer, a detached chronicler of their clandestine affair. From the shadowed sanctuary of my balcony, I would capture the tableau vivant of their illicit passion, framing their silhouettes against the backdrop of the moonlit sky. A subtle tilt of the camera, a strategic angle, and their incriminating forms would materialize into the frame. These nocturnal vignettes, accompanied by a carefully crafted caption, "The moon is beautiful tonight," would then be released into the digital ether, subtle breadcrumbs for those with eyes to see. As the fabricated gestation reached its 6th month, Lysander and Agatha, with an air of strained formality, requested a second audience with my parents. Their demeanor, however, had undergone a noticeable transformation. The previous air of condescending arrogance had been replaced by a palpable unease, a nervous agitation that betrayed their growing desperation. As I trailed in their wake, a sardonic smile played upon my lips. The tide, I sensed, was beginning to turn. "My dear in-laws," Agatha began, her voice a strained imitation of cordiality, "the marital home, circumstances have arisen. We find ourselves in urgent need of funds. Perhaps your family could contribute? Alone, perhaps?" My parents, forewarned and forearmed, exchanged a knowing glance. They had, bless them, fully grasped the nuances of my carefully orchestrated scheme. My father, adopting a tone of deliberate obtuseness, countered with a seemingly innocuous question. The property deed. Whose name is inscribed upon it? Agatha, predictably, resorted to her well-worn tactic of evasive deflection. Oh, but we are all family now. Surely, such legalistic details are unimportant? Whose name is on a piece of paper is quite beside the point. Her words, once again, echoed her previous pronouncements. A monotonous repetition of manipulative platitudes. My father, however, remained impervious to her clumsy attempts at obfuscation. We are not yet family, he stated, his voice firm, devoid of its usual gentle cadence. As of this moment, your property holdings are legally and definitively unrelated to our family's assets. His pronouncement, delivered with the quiet authority of a seasoned educator, silenced Agatha instantly. The color drained from her face, her carefully constructed facade of cordiality crumbling under the weight of his straightforward pronouncement. The implications of his words hung heavy in the air: no wedding, no financial contribution, no family ties. But Eleanor is 6 months with child. Agatha protested, her voice rising in pitch, desperation lacing her tone. We cannot delay any longer. The situation is pressing. Seeing that my parents remained unmoved, she grabbed Lysander's arm, attempting to physically drag him towards the door. Very well then. We shall take our leave. We will await your family's reconsideration. She attempted to salvage the situation, to regain some semblance of control, to exert pressure through a theatrical departure. Her strategy, however, was transparently flawed. She assumed, erroneously, that the advanced stage of my fabricated pregnancy would place my family in a position of desperate urgency, forcing them to capitulate to her demands. She believed, in her profound miscalculation, that we would be desperate to avoid social embarrassment, to secure a hasty marriage, regardless of the financial cost. She underestimated our resolve. She underestimated me. Then, my father stated calmly, his voice cutting through Agatha's histrionics, we shall postpone further discussions until after Eleanor has delivered the child. His pronouncement, echoing Agatha's own words from our previous disastrous encounter, was a deliberate, pointed retort, a subtle yet devastating jab at her manipulative tactics. Agatha, momentarily stunned, sputtered incoherently, her face contorted with frustrated fury. She had, for once, been outmaneuvered, her carefully laid plans thwarted by a quiet, unassuming schoolteacher and his equally astute wife. Agatha, still attempting to salvage some shred of dignity, continued to pull Lysander towards the exit, her grip tightening on his arm. She fully expected, I am certain, that we would succumb to her pressure. That we would call them back, that we would concede to her demands. She banked on our desperation, on our fear of social stigma, on our presumed desire to avoid the perceived shame of an unwed pregnancy. She had, however, profoundly misjudged our family. She had profoundly misjudged me. But their retreat was, in reality, a strategic maneuver, a calculated tactical error. Their eventual return, I knew, was inevitable. Desperation, like a relentless tide, would eventually drive them back to our doorstep, seeking terms, any terms, to salvage their crumbling facade. And when they returned, I would be ready. That evening, a digital missive arrived from Clara, accompanied by a transfer of funds totaling $5,200. And a mischievous emoji. Sister, she wrote, her digital tone echoing her impish grin, the wretched scoundrel has deposited funds into my account. She proceeded to detail the transaction, providing a screenshot for my amusement. Attached to the transfer was a saccharine, almost comical, endearment, baby, thinking of you, dreaming of you. Treat yourself to a large milkshake, my sweet. A bitter smile touched my lips. In our lean years, in the early days of our relationship, a mere request for a $5 milkshake would elicit a furrowed brow, a lecture on fiscal responsibility, a pointed reminder of our precarious financial situation. Darling, he would pronounce, his tone laced with condescending practicality, a milkshake costs more than a stir-fry. Be sensible, my love. We cannot afford such frivolous indulgences. These pronouncements would invariably be followed by the casual appropriation of $20-odd from my wallet for his cigarettes. I had harbored the naive hope that improved circumstances would usher in an era of shared prosperity, of mutual indulgence, of genuine happiness. But some individuals, it seems, are constitutionally incapable of equanimity, destined to navigate only the treacherous terrain of hardship, ill-equipped to traverse the smoother paths of shared success. Clara, my dear, I typed in response, the time is ripe. The coffers of the miserly Lysander had, it seemed, been breached. The moment of truth, the culmination of our carefully orchestrated plan, was at hand. The stage was set. The players were in position. It was time for the final act. That very evening, Lysander, in a moment of inexplicable digital clumsiness, liked one of my Weibo posts. The seemingly innocuous action, however, did not escape the eagle eyes of his devoted online fanbase. A particularly astute follower, a digital sleuth with an uncanny knack for online detection, was the first to notice the errant like. Within minutes, my previously obscure Weibo account was flooded with new followers, my follower count skyrocketing exponentially. Oh, look! Sister-in-law and Lysander are so happy together. The comments section erupted in a chorus of well-wishing pronouncements, a digital outpouring of saccharine congratulations. I, playing my assigned role with practiced ease, responded to each comment with a gracious thank you. My Weibo feed, a carefully curated tableau of domesticity, of shared moments with Lysander, of artfully posed pregnancy photographs, became an overnight sensation. Lysander's girlfriend's sweet daily life trended within the hour, soaring to the top of the trending topics, a digital wildfire consuming the online landscape. My phone erupted in a cacophony of notifications. A relentless barrage of digital alerts. Then, amidst the digital deluge, Lysander's call broke through, his voice sharp, accusatory, laced with barely suppressed rage. Eleanor, I am warning you. Cease this charade. Immediately. Oh, Lysander, darling, I whimpered into the phone, my voice a tremulous imitation of wounded innocence, carefully modulating my tone to convey the appropriate level of delicate distress. Baby, how could you even think such a thing? After all the love I have poured into this relationship? How could you possibly misinterpret my innocent posts? I punctuated my feigned distress with a delicate sob, a carefully calculated performance of emotional vulnerability. Lysander, it seemed, was momentarily disarmed by my theatrical display of hurt feelings, by the seemingly innocuous nature of my online pronouncements. His tone softened, the accusatory edge receding, replaced by a grudging semblance of apology. Wife, he murmured, adopting the endearment with a palpable lack of sincerity, I have been under immense pressure lately. Forgive me, darling. I apologize. I magnanimously accepted his apology, the performance of forgiveness as carefully calibrated as my earlier display of distress. Then, with a calculated move, I selected the most effusive, most gushing comment from the deluge of online praise and responded publicly, Dearest sister-in-law, when will the wedding bells chime for you and Lysander? Oh, darling Lysander, I typed, my fingers dancing across the digital keyboard, says we shall postpone such matters until after the arrival of our little one. Patience, my dears, patience. My response, seemingly innocuous, deceptively vague, ignited a digital firestorm. Lysander's fanbase, predominantly female, seized upon my seemingly innocuous pronouncement, their initial effusive praise morphing into a chorus of indignant outrage. He has impregnated her and refuses to commit? Scoundrel. Villain. Unforgivable. the tide had turned. The digital chorus of adulation had transformed into a cacophony of condemnation. Lysander, once the object of their online adoration, was now cast as the villain, the heartless cad, the irresponsible father-to-be. His carefully cultivated online persona was crumbling before his very eyes. The digital furor intensified, the online vitriol escalating exponentially. Buzz, 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 my phone vibrated incessantly, a relentless stream of WeChat notifications flooding my screen. Clara's messages, gleefully triumphant, punctuated the digital deluge. Sister, she typed, her digital tone practically dancing with delight, I have intel. Lysander is being reprimanded as we speak. If he fails to manage this situation within the week, he faces contractual penalties. Significant ones. I responded with a mischievous emoji, a winking face accompanied by a thumbs up, congratulating her on her impeccable timing, her flawless execution of our plan. Lysander, conspicuously absent from the digital fray, had not liked Clara's posts. Clara, however, had. And her digital endorsement, her tacit acknowledgement of my online narrative, amplified its credibility, lending further weight to the burgeoning scandal. A mere half-hour later, Lysander's call pierced through the digital cacophony. Eleanor, he pleaded, his voice strained, tinged with desperation, I implore you, darling. Tomorrow. My mother and I shall visit your parents. We shall discuss wedding arrangements. We must expedite matters. We must issue a public statement to pacify the fanbase. I adopted a saccharine tone, my voice dripping with false sweetness. Oh, Lysander, darling, that is splendid news. How very thoughtful of you. I then swiftly navigated to my Weibo account and witnessed the digital damage firsthand. Lysander, in a desperate attempt at damage control, had issued a public clarification. We apologize for any misunderstandings. Wedding preparations have been underway for some time. The ceremony is scheduled for 3 days hence. All are cordially invited. His pronouncement, a transparent fabrication, a clumsy attempt to quell the online uprising, was met with immediate digital skepticism. His fanbase, now thoroughly disillusioned, remained unconvinced, many vowing to attend the fabricated wedding, to witness this hastily arranged nuptial spectacle firsthand. I deactivated my Weibo account, effectively silencing the digital drama, and turned my attention to more pressing matters. I contacted my extended family group chat, dispatching a digital summons to my cousins, my uncles, my brothers. Emergency family summit, at our family home, tomorrow morning. Urgent. All hands on deck. And then, a more specific addendum, directed at my burly elder cousins. Cousins, please book the earliest flights available. And perhaps pack your persuasion attire. Just in case. The following morning dawned with an air of tense anticipation. Lysander and Agatha arrived at our family home, their demeanor markedly subdued, their previous arrogance replaced by a carefully cultivated air of obsequious humility. Agatha, with a trembling hand, presented my parents with a red envelope, the traditional symbol of betrothal, containing $8,800, the reduced bride price my parents had reluctantly agreed to. Dear in-laws, she simpered, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes, the bride price, as agreed. Perhaps we can expedite the wedding arrangements? Eleanor's condition, as you know, is becoming increasingly prominent. She gestured vaguely towards my padded abdomen, her tone laced with thinly veiled impatience. She was, it seemed, desperate to formalize the union, to secure her perceived financial advantage before my fabricated pregnancy became undone. My brothers and cousins, bless their protective hearts, arrived in force, their imposing physiques filling the doorway, their collective presence radiating an unspoken air of familial solidarity. They had, it seemed, fully grasped the gravity of the situation, the extent of Lysander and Agatha's duplicity. Before explanations could be offered, before pleasantries could be exchanged, my cousins, fueled by righteous indignation and a potent blend of familial loyalty and brotherly protectiveness, descended upon Lysander, their righteous fury erupting in a flurry of verbal and, regrettably, physical reprimands. Lysander, pale and trembling, was subjected to a torrent of familial invective, punctuated by several well-aimed, and thoroughly deserved, slaps to the face. I, observing the chaotic scene from a safe distance, could not suppress a small, perhaps uncharitable, smile. My father, ever the voice of reason, the embodiment of Confucian restraint, intervened, gently restraining his more impetuous nephews. He sought, as always, a peaceful resolution, a civilized discourse, a semblance of amicable agreement. We are a family of educators, not enforcers, he murmured, his tone laced with a hint of wry amusement. Perhaps we can resolve this matter amicably? He turned to Agatha and Lysander, his demeanor shifting from avuncular geniality to steely resolve. We have only one daughter. In our tradition, a bride price of $200,000 would not be considered excessive. Agatha and Lysander, facing the imposing phalanx of my male relatives, their initial obsequiousness dissolving into abject terror, remained silent, their faces ashen, their eyes darting nervously around the room. 200,000? Agatha finally croaked, her voice barely audible, her face contorted in disbelief. But we agreed on 8,800. Are you attempting to sell your daughter? Her voice, though trembling, still retained a hint of her characteristic avarice. My father, ignoring her crude pronouncements, turned to me, his gaze unwavering. I understand, Eleanor, that Lysander has borrowed a sum of money from you? Perhaps we should incorporate that debt into the wedding negotiations? He was, bless his astute mind, fully aware of the financial exploitation I had endured. He was, in his quiet, understated way, advocating for my financial restitution. And he was, it seemed, intentionally inflating the sum, perhaps as a form of familial retribution. $30,000, he had stated. A significant sum. But, was my father mistaken? My memory, clouded by years of emotional manipulation, was hazy, unreliable. Had it truly been 30,000? Or was my father exaggerating? Agatha, upon hearing the inflated figure, paled further, her eyes darting around the room, calculating escape routes, assessing potential avenues of financial evasion. A debt, she stammered, her voice trembling. But there is no proof of any such transaction. No promissory note. No documentation. Anyone can claim. Anyone can fabricate such allegations. Her voice, though weak, still retained its characteristic shrillness, its inherent dishonesty. She was, it seemed, prepared to brazenly deny the existence of any debt, to rely on the absence of formal documentation to absolve her son of his financial obligations. My father turned to me, his gaze questioning, seeking confirmation, seeking clarification. I hesitated, momentarily speechless. 30,000? Had it truly been that much? My memory, as I said, was unreliable, distorted by the emotional fog of years of manipulation. 10,000, I recalled. $10,000, I had lent him. Not 30. Had my father misremembered? Or was he intentionally inflating the figure, perhaps as a form of punitive bride price? Confusion warred with a growing unease. Was my father, in his righteous indignation, exceeding the bounds of fairness? Was he, in his desire to protect me, to avenge my emotional and financial exploitation, inadvertently resorting to extortion? Lysander, witnessing his mother's increasingly desperate denials, his face flushed with a mixture of shame and resentment, finally interjected, his voice cracking with barely suppressed rage. Eleanor, he shouted, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. You you are a black-hearted woman. I only borrowed $10,000. 10,000. Not 30. You are lying. You are fabricating lies. His outburst, fueled by desperation and a profound lack of self-awareness, was both revealing and illuminating. 10,000. He had admitted it. He had, in his furious denial of the inflated figure, inadvertently confirmed the existence of the debt, the very debt his mother was so vehemently denying. A slow smile spread across my face. My father, it seemed, had not misremembered. He had, in his quiet, strategic way, intentionally inflated the figure, knowing, perhaps, that Lysander's indignant denial would inadvertently betray the truth. My father, it seemed, was not merely an educator, but a master strategist, a subtle manipulator in his own right. And I, it seemed, had underestimated his cunning. Agatha, realizing the catastrophic blunder her son had just committed, shot him a venomous glare, her eyes narrowed slits of fury. She continued to vehemently deny the existence of any debt, clinging to her increasingly threadbare claim of undocumented transactions, of unsubstantiated allegations. Her voice, however, lacked conviction, her denials ringing hollow in the face of her son's inadvertent confession. She had, it seemed, underestimated the astuteness of my family. She had, most certainly, underestimated me. Agatha, witnessing my triumphant smile, my quiet satisfaction at her son's incriminating outburst, finally seemed to grasp the futility of her denials, the hopelessness of her position. Her carefully constructed facade of bravado crumbled, replaced by a look of abject defeat. But her avarice, it seemed, remained undiminished. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence, even in the throes of impending financial ruin, her grasping nature persisted, a stubborn weed refusing to be uprooted. Eleanor, she pleaded, her voice softening, adopting a tone of wheedling desperation. You are being unreasonable. Where is the proof of this debt? No promissory note. No receipts. Nothing. Your claims are baseless. Fabricated. You cannot, you must not, resort to such dishonest tactics. Her voice, though pleading, still retained a hint of its characteristic shrillness, its inherent entitlement. She had, it seemed, underestimated not only our intelligence, but also our resourcefulness. For, as if on cue, my mother, who had remained a silent observer throughout the preceding chaotic exchange, calmly raised her phone, her finger poised above the screen. Perhaps this will refresh your memory, Agatha, she stated, her voice quiet, but firm, devoid of any trace of apology. And then, she pressed play. Lysander's voice, amplified through the phone speaker, filled the room, his words echoing his earlier outburst, his incriminating confession reverberating through the tense silence. Eleanor, you are a black-hearted woman. I only borrowed $10,000. His words, captured and preserved, irrefutable and undeniable, hung in the air, a damning indictment of his duplicity, a devastating refutation of his mother's brazen denials. My mother, her gaze unwavering, turned to Agatha, her voice laced with quiet triumph. 200,000 for the bride price, she stated. Her tone leaving no room for negotiation, no possibility of further debate. Plus the $10,000 owed to Eleanor. A grand total of $210,000. A lucky number, don't you think? She paused, letting her words sink in, letting the weight of their financial predicament crush down upon Agatha and Lysander. Then, with a subtle, almost imperceptible, smile, she added, or perhaps we should round it up to 238,000? A truly auspicious figure, wouldn't you agree? Her voice, though soft, was laced with steel, her gentle demeanor masking a formidable resolve. My mother, it seemed, was not merely a gracious hostess, but a force to be reckoned with. And Agatha and Lysander, it seemed, had finally, belatedly, grasped the true extent of their miscalculation. Agatha and Lysander's faces, already ashen, paled further, their expressions a grotesque tableau of horror and disbelief. Their carefully laid plans had crumbled, their manipulative schemes exposed, their financial avarice laid bare for all to see. "Very well," my father stated, his voice calm, measured, devoid of any trace of triumph. "If these terms are unacceptable, then perhaps we should conclude this discussion. We can, as you suggested earlier, revisit this matter after Eleanor has delivered the child. Or, indeed, perhaps, not at all." His words, a pointed echo of Agatha's earlier pronouncements, were a subtle, yet devastating, rebuke. Agatha, grasping the finality of his pronouncement, the utter hopelessness of their situation, made a last, desperate attempt to salvage some semblance of control. She grabbed Lysander's arm, attempting, once again, to stage a theatrical departure. "Come, Lysander. We shall not be insulted in this manner. We shall take our leave. Let them stew in their avarice." She tugged at his arm, attempting to drag him towards the door, fully expecting, I am certain, that we would once again capitulate, that we would plead with them to stay, that we would concede to their demands. But this time, there was no capitulation. This time, there was only silence. Lysander, however, remained rooted to the spot, his feet seemingly glued to the floor, his gaze fixed on me, his eyes pleading, desperate, devoid of their usual arrogance. "Lysander!" Agatha hissed, her voice laced with exasperation. "Come. We are leaving." Still, he remained immobile, his gaze locked on mine, his silent plea echoing in the tense silence. "Escort them out, please," I stated, my voice calm, devoid of emotion, gesturing towards my burly cousins. "This negotiation is concluded." My cousins, ever obedient, ever protective, moved forward, gently, yet firmly, ushering Agatha towards the door. Lysander, however, remained stubbornly rooted to the spot, his gaze still fixed on me, his eyes now brimming with tears, his composure finally cracking under the weight of his impending financial ruin. "Eleanor," he pleaded, his voice a choked whisper, "please. Please, hear me out. I beg you. Anything you ask. Just don't abandon me. If this deal, falls through, I am ruined. Utterly, irrevocably ruined." His voice broke, dissolving into a sob, his carefully constructed facade of arrogance and entitlement finally shattering, revealing the raw fear, the naked desperation that lay beneath. This, I thought, with a chilling detachment, is what I have been waiting for. This abject humiliation, this public capitulation, this desperate plea for salvation. This moment of utter, unadulterated defeat. A man of considerable stature, reduced to a weeping supplicant, groveling at my feet, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. I reached for a pen and a piece of paper, my movements deliberate, controlled, devoid of any trace of emotion. I wrote out a promissory note, detailing the $10,000 debt, specifying repayment terms, outlining legal recourse in the event of default. I presented the document to him, my gaze unwavering, my voice cold, devoid of pity. "Sign this," I commanded. "And repay the $10,000. Then we shall discuss terms." He stared at the document, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. A promissory note," he stammered, his voice trembling. But I thought you loved me. How can you demand legal documentation between us?" His words, laced with self-pity and a profound lack of self-awareness, were almost comical in their utter absurdity. He had, it seemed, still not grasped the true nature of our relationship, the transactional undercurrent that had always flowed beneath the surface of his carefully constructed charade of affection. Sign it, Lysander, I repeated, my voice hardening, my patience wearing thin. Or there will be no wedding. No deal. No salvation. He hesitated for a moment longer, his gaze darting between the promissory note and my unwavering gaze, his internal struggle palpable. Then, with a sigh of defeated resignation, he took the pen and signed his name, his signature shaky, uneven, a testament to his inner turmoil. The $10,000, I prompted, my voice sharp, demanding. I need a few days, he stammered, his voice barely audible. To liquidate assets. To arrange funds. 2 days, Lysander, I stated, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. 2 days. No more. And then, we shall see. He nodded, his head bobbing mechanically, his eyes still fixed on the floor, his posture radiating abject defeat. And the wedding? He asked, his voice a mere whisper, a fragile thread of hope clinging to the precipice of despair. A performance, I replied, my voice devoid of warmth, devoid of any semblance of affection. A mere formality. I shall appear. That is all. As they departed, Agatha's face remained a mask of thunderous fury, her eyes spitting venom, her posture radiating unadulterated hatred. Lysander, however, seemed strangely relieved. Relieved, perhaps, to have secured a temporary reprieve, to have averted immediate financial ruin. He remained, it seemed, blissfully ignorant of the far greater catastrophe that awaited him, the carefully orchestrated digital detonation that was about to shatter his carefully constructed world. Who are you? And what is your relationship with my boyfriend? Clara's WeChat message flashed across my screen, her tone sharp, accusatory, mirroring the digital persona I had carefully cultivated. I responded in kind, adopting the same confrontational tone, the same carefully crafted digital outrage. Girlfriend, darling. His girlfriend. And you? Some cheap trollop perhaps? She retaliated immediately, firing off a barrage of saccharine selfies, images of her and Lysander in various states of domestic bliss, digital proof of their illicit affair. I, in turn, responded in kind, dispatching a volley of carefully curated pregnancy photos, images of my swollen abdomen, my radiant maternity, digital evidence of my claim to Lysander's affections, to his obligations. Then, with a satisfied sigh, I deactivated my phone, silencing the digital drama, and waited. The seeds of discord had been sown. The digital battle had been engaged. And the inevitable explosion was imminent. As predicted, the digital conflagration erupted with devastating force. The following morning, Lysander's call pierced through the relative tranquility of the early hours, his voice barely recognizable, raw with exhaustion, tinged with despair. Eleanor, he croaked, his voice a mere whisper, devoid of its usual arrogance, its characteristic self-assurance. Eleanor, darling, I am so sorry. So sorry. I adopted a tone of feigned innocence, of wounded bewilderment. Lysander, darling, what is it? What has transpired? You sound distressed. It's Clara, he stammered, his voice cracking with emotion. She has misunderstood our relationship. He attempted to downplay the severity of the situation, to minimize the extent of his betrayal, to cling to the crumbling vestiges of his carefully constructed lies. She misinterpreted my mentorship. My guidance of a intern. His words, a pathetic attempt at damage control, were almost comical in their utter inadequacy. Clara, bless her heart, chose that precise moment to dispatch a series of digital transfers, a cascade of funds totaling $100,000, the illicit gains of her mentorship. $100,000. Readily available, easily dispersed. Yet, in my presence, in my time of need, he had pleaded poverty, feigned financial hardship, refused To part with even a fraction of that sum, forcing me to wait, to plead, to debase myself for a mere $10,000 repayment. The disparity was stark, the injustice palpable. The chasm between his treatment of Clara and his treatment of me was a gaping maw of callous indifference, of profound disrespect. The realization struck me with the force of a physical blow. The depths of his depravity, his utter lack of empathy, his profound capacity for calculated cruelty, were truly bottomless. How long has this mentorship been ongoing, Lysander? I asked, my voice deceptively gentle, carefully masking the rising tide of fury that threatened to consume me. Be truthful, Lysander. For once in your life, tell me the truth. He hesitated, his silence a tacit admission of guilt, a damning confirmation of his duplicity. He attempted, once again, to prevaricate, to obfuscate, to cling to his web of lies. It's recent, he stammered, his voice barely audible. Very recent. Just recently. His blatant dishonesty, his persistent refusal to acknowledge the truth, his unwavering commitment to deception, finally shattered the last vestiges of my patience, the last remnants of my dwindling tolerance. Enough, Lysander, I stated, my voice cold, hard, devoid of any trace of warmth. It is over. Between us. Finished. Terminated. I disconnected the call, severing the digital link, severing the last tenuous thread that still connected us. 6 years. 6 years of my life, wasted, squandered. Irretrievably lost. 6 years of misplaced trust, of naive affection, of foolish devotion, all reduced to nothing, all rendered meaningless by his calculated betrayal. 6 years of my heart, offered freely, willingly, only to be trampled upon, to be discarded like a worthless trinket. 6 years of my soul, laid bare, vulnerable, only to be wounded, to be scarred, to be forever marked by his callous indifference. 6 years. Consider it, I thought with a bitter, self-deprecating laugh, a charitable donation to the Lysander Lynn School of Deception and Betrayal. Tuition fees paid, lessons learned, and never, ever, to be repeated. 2 hours later, a frantic pounding on my door shattered the relative tranquility of the morning. Lysander, disheveled, unshaven, his eyes bloodshot, his clothes rumpled, knelt before my threshold, his voice hoarse with desperation. Eleanor, please. Please, do not. Do not leave me. I know I have erred. I know I have failed you. But I swear, I will change. I will atone. Just give me one more chance. Please. His voice cracked, dissolving into a sob, his carefully constructed facade of composure finally crumbling, revealing the raw panic, the naked terror that lay beneath. His carefully cultivated image of suave sophistication, of effortless charm, of unwavering confidence, was gone, replaced by the pathetic spectacle of a broken man, reduced to groveling at my feet. In his eyes, however, I saw not genuine remorse, not true regret, not even a flicker of genuine affection. I saw only fear. Fear of financial ruin. Fear of professional disgrace. Fear of losing his carefully constructed world, his meticulously crafted image, his precarious perch atop the ladder of social and professional success. Fear of losing everything. And in that moment, a chilling certainty settled within me. My initial regret, my lingering doubt, my fleeting pang of guilt, all vanished, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. My judgment, it seemed, had not merely been flawed, but catastrophically, unforgivably, wrong. How could I have been so blind? So utterly, tragically stupid? Leave, Lysander, I stated, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, devoid of pity. Repay the $10,000. Consider our accounts settled. And then, vanish. Before this situation becomes even more unpleasant. for both of us. I sought, in that moment, to salvage some shred of dignity, to bring this sordid drama to a swift, relatively clean conclusion. I offered him a graceful exit, a chance to minimize the damage, to retreat with a modicum of self-respect intact. He fumbled for his phone, his hands trembling, and initiated a digital transfer. $152,800 flashed across my screen, a sum significantly exceeding the $10,000 debt, a sum that included, perhaps, a tacit admission of guilt, a desperate attempt at appeasement. He pressed his forehead against the floor, his body convulsing with silent sobs, his posture radiating abject defeat. I am so sorry, Eleanor, he whispered, his voice barely audible. No one will ever love you as I did. I was a fool. A blind, ungrateful fool. The funds secured, his fate no longer my concern, his pronouncements irrelevant, his presence intolerable. My father, ever mindful of appearances, ever concerned with maintaining social decorum, intervened, gently lifting the weeping Lysander from the doorstep, ushering him into the relative privacy of our home. Once inside, however, Lysander's attention remained fixated on his phone, his gaze glued to the screen, his fingers frantically tapping, scrolling, searching, seeking. What? Salvation? Redemption? Or merely, distraction? A digital chime echoed through the room, the unmistakable sound of a WeChat notification. Clara's message flashed across my screen, a screenshot of a recent exchange. Timestamped 1 minute prior. Baby, Lysander's message read, saccharine, pathetic, utterly devoid of sincerity. Give me another chance, my love. Once I have resolved this pregnancy situation with that, Harridan, we can be together properly. The word pregnancy hung in the air, a grotesque reminder of his calculated deception, his manipulative tactics, his utter lack of respect for my personhood. A wave of nausea washed over me, a visceral revulsion at the very thought of his touch, of his presence, of his lies. Lysander, still weeping in the corner of our living room, remained oblivious to my silent disgust, to the digital evidence of his continued duplicity, to the utter futility of his pathetic attempts at reconciliation. He continued to sob, his performance of remorse as unconvincing, as transparently manipulative, as every other carefully crafted charade he had ever presented. He was, I realized with a chilling certainty, a man incapable of genuine emotion, a hollow shell of superficial charm, a master of deception, utterly devoid of authenticity. A man who had lost everything, and yet, had learned nothing. People cannot have everything they want, but they can choose to lose things one by one. The words echoed in my mind, a somber refrain, a chillingly accurate summation of Lysander's current predicament. He had pursued everything, grasped for everything, sought to possess everything, and in the end, had lost everything. And he, it seemed, was about to lose, even more. The digital wildfire, once ignited, proved impossible to extinguish. My Weibo account, though deactivated, remained a digital ghost, a haunting reminder of Lysander's public humiliation. Switching to a burner account, I released the screenshots of my digital altercation with Clara, accompanied by a carefully crafted caption, a poignant pronouncement of wounded vulnerability. After enduring so much hardship, so many trials, one still cannot retain those closest to one's heart. Then, switching back to my now reactivated main account, I liked my own burner post, a subtle digital endorsement, a calculated nudge to the online sleuths, the digital detectives eager to dissect every nuance of this unfolding drama. As anticipated, the digital bloodhounds, the ever-vigilant online netizens, swiftly detected the subtle connection, piecing together the digital breadcrumbs I had so deliberately, so strategically, laid. They unearthed my burner account, dissecting its meager content, scrutinizing its limited digital footprint, identifying, with uncanny accuracy, the subtle clues that linked it back to me. My burner account, though sparsely populated, contained a scattering of personal photographs, hastily snapped selfies, easily recognizable as me. The digital detectives, emboldened by their initial discovery, delved deeper, unearthing the nocturnal balcony snapshots, the moonlit silhouettes of Lysander and Clara's clandestine rendezvous. The digital timeline began to coalesce, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with chilling precision. The truth, meticulously concealed, was about to be exposed. The latest digital revelation, however, was the most explosive yet. The screenshot of my digital altercation with Clara, the digital catfight between the wronged fiancé and the unsuspecting mistress, ignited a digital firestorm, eclipsing even the previous online furor. Sister-in-law, one particularly astute online observer commented, "Did you realize? In your photos from months ago, the dog and woman were already entangled. Already embracing." Of course, I realized, I thought, with a sardonic smile. I was the one who took the photographs. The digital detectives, however, were only just beginning to unravel the intricate web of deceit, the carefully constructed timeline of Lysander's duplicity. The digital magnifying glass, wielded by thousands of online sleuths, was now focused, laser-like, on every detail, every nuance, every digital breadcrumb I had so carefully, so strategically, disseminated. And the truth, once whispered in the shadows, was about to be screamed from the rooftops. The online frenzy intensified, the digital conflagration escalating exponentially, surpassing even the trending wedding hashtags of a certain celebrity couple. Then, the inevitable explosion. The digital dam burst. The truth, meticulously concealed, was unleashed upon the digital world, a torrent of damning evidence, a flood of irrefutable proof. Lysander Lynn cheating scandal, full timeline exposed. The hashtag trended globally, dominating every social media platform, eclipsing every other online narrative, consuming the digital landscape like a wildfire. The truth, once hidden in the shadows, was now omnipresent, inescapable, undeniable. Online detectives, tireless in their pursuit of digital justice, meticulously pieced together the fragmented clues, the scattered breadcrumbs I had so strategically disseminated, constructing a comprehensive, damning timeline of Lysander's duplicity. Timeline of betrayal, Eleanor's ordeal. The narrative unfolded with chilling clarity. 2 months into Eleanor's pregnancy, Lysander, far from planning a wedding, was already entangled in an illicit affair, brazenly engaging in clandestine rendezvous, conducting his illicit trysts beneath the very windows of his unsuspecting fiancé's home. In the later stages of Eleanor's fabricated gestation, the mistress, emboldened by Lysander's duplicity, escalated her campaign of harassment, directly confronting the pregnant fiancé, demanding what? Her deference? Her submission? Her silence? The wronged fiancé, subjected to this relentless onslaught of betrayal and humiliation, remained stoic, dignified, enduring her ordeal with quiet grace, suffering in silence, a victim of calculated cruelty, a casualty of heartless deception. Lysander's phone calls, once insistent, demanding, accusatory, now ceased altogether, replaced by a deafening silence. I, playing my assigned role with unwavering dedication, continued to cultivate my online persona, the wronged, yet stoic, fiancé, the victim of heartless betrayal, the embodiment of quiet suffering, the picture of dignified resilience. Then, the final digital detonation. A new hashtag trended, eclipsing all previous online narratives, overshadowing even the most sensational celebrity scandals. Lysander Lynn fired, faces massive contractual penalties. The digital newsfeed exploded, the online landscape erupting in a chorus of schadenfreude, of righteous indignation, of gleeful vindication. Justice served. Karma is a bitch. Serves him right. Witnessing the digital fallout, the online conflagration consuming Lysander's professional life, a slow smile spread across my lips. I captured a screenshot of the Trending hashtag, a digital trophy of my carefully orchestrated victory, and dispatched it to Clara, a silent digital high five, a shared moment of triumphant vindication. Clara, it seemed, was in high spirits, her digital response radiating a lightness, a newfound sense of liberation. Sister, she typed, her digital tone buoyant, carefree, I am contemplating a geographic relocation. A change of scenery, perhaps? A cleansing of the digital palette? I responded immediately, offering my enthusiastic endorsement, and dispatched a digital transfer of funds. A generous sum of $100,000, a small token of my gratitude, a gesture of solidarity, a digital down payment on her new beginning. Sister, she responded, her digital tone laced with confusion, with a hint of bewilderment. What is the meaning of this, largesse? I am perplexed. The funds previously disbursed by Lysander, I typed in response, my fingers flying across the digital keyboard. The milkshake money, if you will. Those funds are yours, my dear. Yours to dispose of as you see fit. A parting gift from the Lysander Lynn School of Deception and Betrayal. Consider it tuition reimbursement. Clara's call followed immediately, her voice choked with emotion, tinged with a hint of guilt. Eleanor, she stammered, her voice trembling, why are you being so generous? So kind? After everything? I do not deserve such benevolence. I swiftly composed a Weibo post, a final digital pronouncement, a public declaration of forgiveness, of closure, of moving on. He deceived us both, my dear, I typed, my fingers dancing across the screen. You bear no culpability. Nor do I. You chose to embrace the truth. You chose to stand by my side. For that, my dear Clara, I am eternally grateful. I released the post into the digital ether, a final digital flourish, a punctuation mark on this chapter of my life, a definitive farewell. Deactivating my phone, silencing the digital cacophony, a profound sense of emptiness settled within me. 6 years. 6 years of my life, now reduced to a digital footnote, a cautionary tale in the annals of online scandal. 6 years of dreams, of hopes, of aspirations, now vanished, dissipated like smoke, leaving behind only the bitter residue of betrayal, the lingering scent of deception. It all seemed, in retrospect, like a dream. A vivid, unsettling, ultimately illusory dream. Clara departed, her digital presence fading gradually from my daily life, her occasional updates arriving from distant locales, postcards from her journey of self-discovery. Lysander, stripped of his professional standing, his online persona decimated, his reputation in tatters, vanished from the digital landscape, a ghost in the machine, his online presence erased, his digital footprint extinguished. He resurfaced, predictably, attempting to re-establish contact, to rekindle the embers of our non-existent relationship, his messages pleading, pathetic, utterly devoid of sincerity. Eleanor, darling, his messages began, saccharine, desperate, utterly devoid of self-awareness. I cannot exist without you. We have a child, Eleanor. Our baby. Think of our future. His attempts to manipulate me through the fabricated child, to exploit my maternal instincts, to reignite the embers of our dead relationship, were as pathetic as they were infuriating. His words, once laced with charm, with practiced endearments, now tasted like ash in my mouth, leaving behind only a bitter residue of disgust. His calls, persistent, relentless, intrusive, became intolerable. I deactivated my phone, severing the digital connection, silencing his desperate pleas, erasing his digital presence from my life, just as I had erased him from my heart. Then, with a newfound sense of liberation, a lightness I had not felt in years, I dialed a new number, a number unfamiliar to my digital Rolodex, a number untainted by the ghosts of past betrayals. Hello, beautiful, I purred into the phone, my voice laced with playful flirtation, a deliberate echo of Clara's own digital persona. "Where are you, my dear? And are you available?" A familiar voice, bright, cheerful, instantly recognizable, responded with a delighted laugh. "Sister. In Kunming, darling. And, absolutely. Name the time, name the place, and I shall be there." I requested her address, booked flights for myself and my parents, and the following day, we departed, leaving behind the ghosts of our past, embarking on a journey towards an uncertain, yet undeniably, brighter, future. Clara, radiant, rejuvenated, positively, blooming, greeted us upon arrival, her beauty amplified by the vibrant colors of Yunnan, a single, perfect blossom tucked behind her ear, accentuating her youthful charm. "Auntie. Uncle. Welcome to Kunming." She greeted my parents with effusive warmth, her genuine affection radiating outwards, her youthful exuberance infectious. She whisked us away, a whirlwind tour of the city's hidden gems, its bustling markets, its tranquil gardens, its vibrant cultural tapestry, her generosity boundless, her spirit unbreakable. Throughout our whirlwind adventure, she insisted on covering every expense, her attempts to reciprocate my earlier generosity, both touching and unnecessary. "What are your plans, Clara?" I asked, during a rare moment of quiet reflection, a stolen moment of respite amidst our whirlwind sightseeing tour. "For the future?" Clara, ever decisive, ever independent, had already formulated a plan, a vision of her own making, a dream of self-sufficiency, of floral independence. "Kunming," she declared, her eyes sparkling with newfound purpose, "is enchanting. The climate is healing. I intend to settle here. To establish roots. To open a flower shop. To become a beautiful proprietress." "A flower shop?" I echoed, a slow smile spreading across my face. "And would this beautiful proprietress perhaps be in need of a beautiful business partner?" Clara leaned against my shoulder, her laughter bubbling up, unrestrained, joyous, the sound echoing through the tranquil garden, a melody of newfound hope, of shared dreams, of budding friendship. "Thank you, Eleanor," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, her silent gratitude echoing the unspoken promise of a shared future, a future blooming with possibilities. I had, in my quiet moments of introspection, perused Clara's carefully curated online playlists, deciphered the cryptic pronouncements of her social media posts, glimpsed the lingering shadows of her past wounds, the unspoken echoes of her lingering pain. I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within my soul, that her healing was not yet complete, that the scars of betrayal, the echoes of past hurts, still lingered beneath the surface of her newfound exuberance. Whether her lingering sadness stemmed from her ill-fated entanglement with Lysander, or from a deeper, more profound sense of self-reproach, I could not definitively discern. But I knew, instinctively, that she carried a burden, a weight of unspoken grief, a lingering shadow. But I also knew, with an equal measure of certainty, that beneath the lingering shadows, beneath the fragile veneer of youthful optimism, lay a spirit of remarkable resilience, a heart capable of profound compassion, a soul yearning for genuine connection, for authentic friendship. And in that moment, amidst the vibrant blooms of a Kunming garden, surrounded by the promise of a new beginning, I knew, with unwavering conviction, that Clara and I, two women forged in the crucible of betrayal, two souls seeking solace and redemption, could, and would, become friends. Perhaps even more. And so, in the heart of Kunming, a flower shop bloomed, a testament to resilience, a symbol of newfound hope, a sanctuary of shared dreams. Two proprietresses flourished. The sign proclaimed, its lettering elegant, understated, its message clear, unambiguous. And beneath the shop's name, a simple, yet profound, motto: flowers wither. Love is merely ornamentation. A subtle, yet powerful, declaration of independence, a quiet affirmation of self-love, a gentle reminder that true happiness, lasting fulfillment, begins not with seeking external validation, not with chasing fleeting romantic illusions, but with cultivating inner peace, with embracing self-acceptance, with learning to love oneself. Only then, only when we have learned to nurture our own inner gardens, can we truly, authentically, have the capacity to love another. And only then, perhaps, might love, true love, genuine love, not as mere ornamentation, not as a fleeting, ephemeral bloom, but as a deeply rooted, enduring blessing, finally blossom. The end.